My name is Jack Carter, and up until last Tuesday, I was a private investigator specializing in messy divorces and insurance fraud. Nothing glamorous, but it paid the bills and kept me out of trouble. That changed when Caroline Ward walked into my office, clutching a journal to her chest like it held the secrets to the universe. She was the star witness in the upcoming trial of Victor Crane, a billionaire tech mogul accused of bribery, fraud, and about a dozen other crimes. "This stays with me," she said, sliding the journal across my desk. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled. "If anything happens to me, you'll know where to start." I'd heard the rumors. Crane's people had a knack for making problems disappear. The witness list for his trial had already shrunk by 3 names, all due to accidents. But Caroline wasn't just a problem. She was the problem. Her testimony could bury Crane for life. I leaned back in my chair, studying her. Her dark hair was pinned up neatly, but the shadows under her eyes betrayed weeks of sleepless nights. "What makes you think you're in danger?" She hesitated, glancing toward the window. "It's not just a feeling. They've been watching me." "Who?" She swallowed hard, her gaze darting back to me. "Everyone. Crane's lawyers, his security team, strangers on the street who linger too long. They know what I have on him." I opened the journal. The first few pages were a neat script, detailing meetings, names, and dollar amounts. By the third page, my pulse quickened. It wasn't just damning evidence. It was a roadmap to the entire conspiracy. Bribes disguised as charitable donations, offshore accounts tied to shell companies, and something darker hinted at in cryptic notations. "Vessel delivery confirmed. 3 a.m. docks." "This is dangerous," I said, closing the journal. "But why bring it to me? Shouldn't the prosecutor have this?" Her laugh was bitter. "You think the DA's office isn't compromised? Half of them are on Crane's payroll." That hit a nerve. I'd seen cases crumble from inside jobs before. If she was right, the journal was safer with me than in some government office. "Fine," I said, locking it in my desk drawer. "You've got my attention. What's your plan?" "Stay alive until I testify." "Not exactly inspiring." She managed a weak smile. "You're supposed to be the smart one. Figure something out." I agreed to watch her back, though I wasn't entirely sure how. That night, I set up a rotation of decoy cars to throw off any tails and moved her to a nondescript motel on the outskirts of town. I told her not to leave for any reason and checked in with her every hour. But it didn't matter. 3 days later, Caroline was gone. I arrived at the motel just after sunrise, my stomach churning with dread. Her room was immaculate. No signs of a struggle, no overturned furniture, nothing out of place. The bed was made, the curtains drawn, and the half-empty cup of coffee on the nightstand was still warm. Panic clawed at my chest as I checked the bathroom, the closet, even under the bed. Nothing. Her phone sat on the dresser, powered off. A small duffel bag, her only luggage, was gone. I dialed her number, but it went straight to voicemail. "Caroline," I said, my voice shaking. "Call me, now." I stared at the room, trying to piece together what had happened. There was no forced entry, no blood, no sign of a break-in. But the lock on the door? It wasn't broken. It was bypassed. A faint scratch near the latch caught my eye, as if someone had used a tool to pick it. I took out my phone and called the desk clerk. "Did anyone visit room 213 last night?" There was a pause. No. Not that I know of." "You sure?" "Well, there was a guy in a suit. Came around midnight, said he was her brother." My blood ran cold. "What did he look like?" "Average, I guess. Brown hair, glasses. Real polite." "Polite, sure." I thanked him and hung up, cursing under my breath. Whoever had taken Caroline was professional. Someone Crane hired, no doubt. My gut told me she was still alive, but I had no way of knowing for how long. I raced back to my office, the journal burning a hole in my desk drawer. If Caroline had been taken because of what she knew, this was my only leverage. I flipped it open and scanned the pages again, looking for anything I might have missed. Then I saw it, a single word scrawled hastily in the margins. Locker. Locker. Where? A gym? A train station? I grabbed my coat and headed to the nearest station, my mind racing. If Caroline had hidden something else, it could be the key to finding her, or the nail in her coffin. I parked my car near the station, the exhaust of the early commuter trains hanging in the cool morning air. The word locker echoed in my mind, each step toward the building feeling heavier than the last. It was a desperate gamble. The station might not even be the right one, but I had nothing else to go on. Inside, the place buzzed with activity, travelers lugging suitcases, baristas churning out coffee orders, and a janitor mopping up yesterday's grime. My eyes locked onto a row of lockers near the far wall. They looked old, scratched with graffiti and speckled with rust. I scanned the rows carefully, half expecting some clue to leap out at me. Nothing. Caroline hadn't left a number. No breadcrumbs. If there was something here, it wasn't going to announce itself. Pulling out my phone, I flipped through the photos I'd taken of her journal. She'd been meticulous with details, but no locker number stood out. A sharp pang of frustration hit me until I noticed a faint smudge on the margin near the word locker. Beneath the scrawl, there was something that almost looked like a number. 42. I rushed down the aisle, weaving through the foot traffic. My heart pounded harder with each step. If there was nothing in locker 42, I'd have to scour every other one. And that wasn't a game plan. I reached it, holding my breath. Locked. Of course. A faded sign overhead read, "Key rental at booth 2." I turned toward the booth, but my instincts flared. Someone was watching me. I didn't glance around right away. Instead, I knelt to tie my shoe, using the moment to scan the reflection in the polished tile floor. A man in a gray coat stood near the coffee shop, pretending to read a newspaper. His stance was too rigid, his eyes flicking toward me every few seconds. I swallowed hard and stood, forcing myself to walk casually to the rental booth. The clerk barely looked up as I slid a 20 across the counter. "Key for locker 42. He handed it over without a word. As I turned back, the man in the gray coat was gone. My pulse quickened, the tiny key feeling heavier in my palm. I kept my head down as I returned to the locker, sliding the key into the slot and twisting. It clicked open, and I pulled the door ajar. Inside was a small black notebook. A newer one, different from the journal Caroline had given me. I grabbed it and quickly closed the locker, returning the key to the booth before heading straight for my car. I didn't stop to check if I was being followed. I just drove. When I reached the parking lot outside my office, I finally opened the notebook. The first few pages were blank. I flipped through, frustration mounting, until I hit a folded note tucked into the spine. It read, "Jack, if you're reading this, I'm running out of time. I've left breadcrumbs. They're all I can manage. Trust no one and don't take this to the police. There's a name you need to find. Elias Kane. He's the missing piece." My stomach dropped. I didn't recognize the name, but it had weight, like a loaded gun waiting to fire. I flipped through the rest of the notebook, finding half-finished sentences, fragments of meetings, and a few dates that lined up with entries in the journal. But one thing stood out, a hand-drawn map of the docks, with a single building circled in red. Next to it were two words, midnight, vessel. Caroline's cryptic notes from the journal came rushing back. Vessel delivery confirmed. 3 a.m., docks. My heart raced. Whatever this was, it tied directly to the conspiracy she was uncovering. And it wasn't just about bribery anymore. This was bigger, darker. I grabbed my laptop and searched for Elias Kane. The results were sparse. A few business listings, one for a shipping company based in New York. But the most notable result was an obituary. Elias Kane, CEO of Kane Shipping, presumed dead in a boating accident 2 years ago. Body never recovered. Dead? My gut told me otherwise. A man like Elias Kane didn't just vanish without leaving a ripple. If he was connected to Crane, there was no way this accident was a coincidence. The map in the notebook called to me, the circled building like a beacon. Midnight wasn't far off, and if Caroline had risked everything to lead me there, I couldn't ignore it. But I wasn't stupid. I loaded my revolver, double-checked my phone battery, and stashed both the journal and notebook in my office safe before heading out. If things went south, I needed a fallback. The docks were eerily quiet, the usual hum of industry replaced by an oppressive silence. I parked in a shadowy corner, keeping my headlights off as I approached the circled building. It was a warehouse, its exterior battered by years of salt air. I slipped inside through a side door, my footsteps muffled on the damp concrete. The air reeked of diesel and something acrid I couldn't place. Stacks of shipping crates loomed like shadows, their labels barely legible in the dim light. I crept closer to the center of the warehouse, ears straining for any sound. Then I heard voices. Two men were arguing near a large crate marked with foreign symbols. I ducked behind a stack of pallets, inching closer to catch their words. Shipment delayed. Crane's gonna lose his mind. Not our problem. The girl was supposed to be the loose end. She's gone now. My blood froze. They were talking about Caroline. Before I could process it, the larger man stepped toward the crate and pried it open. My heart nearly stopped when I saw what was inside. The crate groaned as its lid came loose, the sound cutting through the silence like a knife. I pressed myself against the stack of pallets, trying to get a better view without giving myself away. The two men stood shoulder to shoulder, their faces illuminated by the faint glow of a work lamp hanging nearby. Inside the crate was a metal container, sleek and industrial, its surface marked with biohazard symbols. One of the men, shorter, with a wiry build, pulled a tablet from his pocket and tapped a few commands. A mechanical hiss escaped as the container unsealed. "Let's get this over with," the wiry man said, his voice clipped. The larger man grunted and leaned into the crate, pulling out something wrapped in thick plastic. At first I thought it was some kind of equipment, but then I saw the unmistakable outline of a body, a human form, perfectly still. My stomach churned. "You think Crane knows what's in these things?" the larger man asked, hefting the plastic-wrapped form onto the floor. The wiry man shrugged, not looking up from his tablet. "He doesn't care. As long as they get where they're supposed to go and the money flows, it's not our business to ask questions." The larger man snorted. "You don't wonder, though. Feels off." "Everything feels off with Crane," the wiry man said, his tone flat. "Now shut up and help me reseal this." I ducked back behind the pallets, my mind racing. The container wasn't just carrying evidence, it was carrying people, or what was left of them. If Caroline had stumbled onto this, no wonder she'd vanished. I needed proof. My phone was in my jacket pocket, and I pulled it out with trembling hands, angling the camera toward the scene. The lighting wasn't great, but it would have to do. As I hit record, I prayed the shadows kept me hidden. The men finished resealing the crate and began dragging the wrapped body toward another section of the warehouse. Their voices faded, leaving me alone in the oppressive silence. I exhaled shakily and crept closer to the now empty crate, curiosity battling my better judgment. I needed to know more. What was Crane moving, and why? The tablet the wiry man had been using lay on a nearby crate. I scanned the area, heart pounding, before snatching it. Its screen was still active, displaying a manifest. My eyes darted over the entries. Item number 0312, biospecimen classified. Destination, Port of Dakar, Senegal, ETA, 48 hours. Classified biospecimens? My blood ran cold. This wasn't just human trafficking. It was something more sinister. I took a photo of the manifest, careful not to leave fingerprints on the screen, and slipped the tablet back where I found it. As I turned to leave, a faint noise froze me in my tracks. Footsteps. I ducked behind a nearby stack of crates, peeking around the corner. The larger man was walking back, muttering under his breath. He stopped near the crate, looking around as if sensing something was off. "Hey," he called out. "You hear that?" I held my breath, my pulse hammering in my ears. The wiry man's voice echoed from deeper in the warehouse. "What now?" "I think someone's here." Panic surged through me. If they found me, I was dead. I scanned my surroundings, looking for an escape route. There, a narrow gap between two rows of crates. I slipped through, crouching low and moving as quickly as I dared. Behind me, the larger man's footsteps grew louder. I reached the edge of the warehouse and spotted the side door I'd come in through. Freedom was only a few steps away. But then my phone buzzed in my pocket. The sound was deafening in the silence. "Hey!" the man shouted. "Who's there?" I bolted for the door, slamming it open and sprinting into the night. Shouts erupted behind me, but I didn't look back. My car was parked a block away, hidden in the shadows of a decrepit loading dock. I reached it just as the warehouse door burst open, the two men silhouetted against the light. I dove into the driver's seat and peeled out, tires screeching. A glance in the rearview mirror showed them running after me, but they weren't fast enough. My hands shook as I drove, the weight of what I'd seen pressing down on me. Caroline's notes had hinted at a conspiracy, but this was something else entirely. Whatever Crane was involved in, it went beyond bribery and fraud. I pulled into a secluded parking lot and killed the engine, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I replayed the footage on my phone, relief flooding me when I saw it had captured everything. The crate, the container, the men, even the body. But this wasn't over. The manifest mentioned a shipment scheduled to leave for Senegal in 2 days. If I could intercept it, I might find the evidence I needed to bring Crane down. There was just one problem. I was officially in over my head. I needed backup, someone I could trust, and I had one name on my list, Elias Kane. I sat in my car for a long time, staring at the name on my phone, Elias Kane. If Caroline was right, he was the missing piece, the man who could unravel this entire conspiracy. But how do you find someone who's supposed to be dead? I started with his obituary. The boating accident that had supposedly claimed Kane's life was well documented. But the more I dug, the more the details felt thin. The accident had occurred on a private yacht off the coast of Florida. Witnesses had reported seeing a vessel in flames before it sank, but no wreckage was ever recovered. The Coast Guard had called off the search after 2 days, declaring it impossible to continue safely. Suspiciously convenient. Next, I checked Kane Shipping. The company had been sold to a holding group 6 months after the accident, its operations streamlined and rebranded under a new name, Mariner Solutions. I flagged the name for later, noting the connection to Crane's offshore accounts mentioned in Caroline's journal. But it was the missing links that intrigued me most. Elias Kane had been a visible public figure, his face splashed across trade magazines and business expos. Yet after his disappearance, his digital footprint vanished almost overnight. No interviews, no tributes, no lawsuits from grieving families of employees. Just silence. It was deliberate. Someone wanted him erased. I needed an expert, someone who could dig deeper than I could. That's when I remembered Tony Vega, a hacker I'd worked with years ago. Tony owed me a favor, and he loved nothing more than unraveling secrets no one else could reach. I called him, trying to keep my voice casual. "Tony, it's Jack. Need a favor." "Jack Carter," he said, dragging out my name like a joke. "Long time, no trouble. What's the gig?" "Guy named Elias Kane, supposedly dead. I need everything you can find." Tony snorted. "Dead men are my specialty. Give me 2 hours." While Tony worked, I focused on the next lead, the docks. The shipment scheduled for Senegal wasn't just a transaction. It was a key piece of the puzzle. If I could track its movements or intercept it before it left port, I might learn what Crane's operation was really moving. I parked near the docks that evening, blending into the sea of rusted sedans and pickup trucks. Through my binoculars, I watched as workers loaded crates onto a cargo ship. The scene looked routine at first glance, but I recognized the emblem from the warehouse manifest, a stylized wave with the letters MS, Mariner Solutions. This wasn't just Crane's operation, it was Kane's too. As I watched, my phone buzzed. "Tony." "Got something," he said without preamble. "Your boy Elias Kane? He's not as dead as they'd like you to think." My pulse quickened. "What did you find?" "After his accident, he pops up under a different alias. Elliot Kane. Subtle, right? He's been laying low in South America, mostly Argentina. Quiet life, no big splashes. But here's the kicker. He's still moving money. Same offshore accounts you mentioned in that journal of yours." "Argentina?" I muttered. "What's he doing there?" "Same thing he was doing before, just quieter. Shipping routes, dummy companies, moving things people don't want tracked. My guess? He's part of whatever mess you've stumbled into." I thought about the map Caroline had drawn. If Kane was alive and still pulling strings, he might know what vessel really meant. But getting to him in Argentina wasn't an option. Not yet. I needed to deal with the shipment first. "Thanks, Tony. Send me what you got." "Already did." "Oh, and Jack? Be careful. This guy's connected to some scary people. Wouldn't want to lose my favorite client. I hung up, Tony's warning bouncing around my head. Kane wasn't just alive, he was thriving, hidden in plain sight. And if he was tied to Crane's operation, that meant two things. He might know where Caroline was, and he'd do anything to keep his secrets buried. I shifted my focus back to the docks. The cargo ship was nearly loaded and the workers were starting to disperse. If I was going to move, it had to be now. I slipped out of my car, pulling my jacket tight against the evening chill. Keeping to the shadows, I made my way toward the ship. The security was sparse, two guards patrolling lazily near the gangway. I waited until they moved out of sight, then darted onto the ship, ducking behind a stack of crates. The hum of the ship's engine vibrated through the metal floor. I crept deeper into the hold, searching for the crate marked on the manifest. Rows of containers loomed above me, their labels faint in the dim light. Finally, I spotted it. Number 0312, the same crate I'd seen at the warehouse. I approached cautiously, listening for any sounds of movement. The crate was secured with heavy-duty bolts, but someone had left a crowbar nearby. I grabbed it, prying the lid open as quietly as I could. The smell hit me first, chemical, sterile, and wrong. Inside was another sealed container, similar to the one I'd seen before. My heart raced as I unlatched it, bracing for what I might find. Inside was a small refrigerated unit, humming softly. And within that unit, there were rows of vials, each one filled with a dark, viscous liquid. Labels marked in unfamiliar codes lined the edges, but one stood out. Project Vessel, Phase 2. I didn't know what I was looking at, but I knew it wasn't good. My phone camera flashed as I took photos, documenting everything. This wasn't just about human trafficking anymore. This was science turned into something unholy. I sealed the crate and slipped away, adrenaline surging as I reached the gangway. But as I stepped off the ship, a voice behind me froze me in place. "Going somewhere, Carter?" I turned slowly, my heart pounding like a war drum. Standing at the base of the gangway was Victor. The gray coat he'd worn at the warehouse was gone, replaced with a dark tactical vest that gleamed under the dock's floodlights. In one hand, he held a pistol pointed straight at me. "Always poking your nose where it doesn't belong," he said, his tone dripping with disdain. "You're becoming a real pain, Carter." I raised my hands, trying to appear calm despite the panic surging through me. "Victor, we don't have to do this. I'm just an investigator. I don't know enough to hurt you." His smile was wolfish. "You know enough to stick your neck out, which makes you a problem, and Crane doesn't like problems." I glanced around, searching for an opening. The ship's engine rumbled behind me, drowning out the distant cries of seagulls. The docks were deserted, save for the few scattered lights reflecting off the water. If I ran, he'd shoot. If I stayed, he'd probably kill me anyway. "Look," I said, buying time, "I'm just trying to find Caroline Ward. She's the one Crane wants. Take me to her, and I'll walk away. No cops, no press. This doesn't have to get messy." Victor tilted his head, his expression amused. "You really think you can negotiate? You've seen too much, Carter. You think I didn't notice you sneaking around the warehouse? Taking pictures of things you shouldn't?" My stomach dropped. He knew about the footage. "You have no idea what you've stumbled into," he continued, stepping closer. "Caroline Ward isn't your concern anymore. She's already—" A loud bang echoed through the docks, cutting him off. Victor's head snapped to the side as a bullet grazed his arm, and I seized the moment. I dove behind a stack of crates as another shot rang out. From the shadows near the ship, a figure emerged, tall, wiry, and holding a sniper rifle. I didn't recognize him, but his presence was a miracle I didn't plan to question. The man shouted something in a language I didn't understand, and Victor, clutching his wounded arm, ducked behind a nearby forklift. "You've got backup!" Victor yelled, his voice laced with anger. "Big mistake, Carter!" The sniper motioned to me, his intent clear. "Move!" I didn't need a second invitation. I sprinted toward the dock's edge, zigzagging to avoid being an easy target. Behind me, gunfire erupted, the sharp cracks reverberating off the metal containers. My lungs burned, but I didn't stop until I reached a small row of maintenance shacks near the water. The sniper caught up to me moments later, his face obscured by a scarf. "Are you Jack Carter?" His accent was thick, Eastern European, and his tone was curt. "Yeah," I panted, still catching my breath. "Who the hell are you?" "Friend of Caroline," he said, scanning the area for threats. "She sent me to cover you." My chest tightened at the mention of her name. "She's alive?" He nodded. "For now. But if we don't move, neither of us will be for much longer." Behind us, Victor barked orders to his men. The sound of boots hitting concrete filled the air. Reinforcements. We didn't have much time. The sniper grabbed my arm, pulling me toward a nearby motorboat tied to the dock. "We need to get out of here." "Wait," I protested, digging my heels in. "I have proof, photos, documents. I can't just run." "Your proof is useless if you're dead," he snapped, shoving me toward the boat. "Get in." Reluctantly, I climbed aboard. The sniper untied the boat and fired up the engine, the roar cutting through the night. Victor and his men emerged from the shadows just as we pulled away, their shouts drowned out by the motor's growl. The sniper navigated the choppy waters with precision, weaving between cargo ships and barges. I sat in silence, clutching the edge of the boat and trying to process everything. Caroline was alive. Somehow she'd managed to stay one step ahead of Crane and his men, and now she'd sent this stranger to pull me out of the fire. After what felt like hours, the boat slowed, and the sniper guided us into a secluded marina. He killed the engine and tied the boat to the dock, gesturing for me to follow him. "Where are we?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "Safe house," he replied. "Caroline's waiting." We entered a dilapidated building at the marina's edge. The interior was sparse. Bare walls, a folding table, and a single light bulb dangling from the ceiling. But none of that mattered when I saw her. Caroline sat at the table, her face pale but determined. Her eyes lit up when she saw me. "Jack," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You made it." "Barely," I muttered, collapsing into a chair across from her. "You've got a hell of a guardian angel." I nodded toward the sniper, who leaned against the doorframe, watching us like a hawk. Caroline smiled faintly. "His name's Alexei. He's been helping me since I disappeared." I studied her, searching for answers. "Caroline, what's going on? What is Crane really doing? What's Project Vessel?" Her expression darkened, and she reached into her pocket, pulling out a folded document. She slid it across the table to me. "This is what they're protecting, what they're willing to kill for." I unfolded the paper, my hands trembling as I read the words at the top. "Vessel Protocol, Biogenetic Optimization Trials." "What is this?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Human experimentation," she said, her tone heavy with dread. "Crane's not just trafficking people, Jack. He's using them as test subjects." My stomach turned as the pieces of the puzzle finally came together. The vials in the crate, the biohazard symbols, the missing people. Crane wasn't just a criminal, he was a monster, and now we had to stop him. Caroline's words hung in the air like a death knell. Human experimentation. I had suspected Crane's operation was bigger than bribery and fraud, but this was something out of a dystopian nightmare. I forced myself to focus, scanning the document she'd handed me. It was dense with technical jargon, but certain phrases jumped out. Genetic modification, subject compliance, and test yields optimized for military applications. My stomach churned as I pieced it together. Crane wasn't just trafficking people. He was turning them into something else. I looked up at Caroline. "How deep does this go?" Her face was grim. Deep enough that even Kane walked away. The mention of Kane's name snapped my attention back to her. "Elias Kane? He's alive. I've got proof he's still moving money." "I know," she said, her voice steady but low. "He's been in hiding ever since Crane turned on him. Kane set up the infrastructure for Project Vessel, but he didn't like what it became. When Crane pushed for human trials, Kane tried to shut it down. And Crane decided to make him disappear," I said, the puzzle falling into place. Caroline nodded. "But Kane's still out there, Jack. If we can find him, we can expose everything. He has the records, the contacts. He's the key to bringing Crane down." "But how?" I asked, frustration bleeding into my voice. "He's hiding in Argentina. We're barely keeping our heads above water here." "That's why I brought Alexei," she said, glancing at the sniper leaning against the doorframe. "He can get us to Kane. Quietly." Alexei folded his arms, his expression unreadable. It's not easy. Kane is well protected. Crane's men are still looking for him, too. We don't have a choice, Caroline said firmly. If Crane ships out the next phase of Project Vessel, we're looking at more than just a conspiracy. We're looking at lives lost. Or worse. I exhaled sharply, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. What's the plan? Alexei stepped forward, his voice calm and deliberate. First, we need to secure the proof you gathered. The footage, the manifest, everything. If Crane's people catch wind of it, they'll burn every trace. It's in my office safe, I said. They'd need a blowtorch to get it. Good, Alexei replied. Then we move tonight. Kane has a contact in Buenos Aires, a man named Arturo Reyes. He's the only one who knows Kane's exact location. If we can get to him, we can find Kane. And if Reyes isn't cooperative? I asked. Alexei's expression darkened. He will be. I wasn't sure what disturbed me more, Alexei's confidence or the implications of what cooperation might mean, but there wasn't time to argue. Every moment we wasted was another opportunity for Crane to cover his tracks. We left the marina under the cover of darkness, Alexei driving a nondescript van he'd stashed nearby. Caroline sat in the back, her fingers drumming nervously on her knee. I kept my gaze on the road ahead, my mind racing through contingencies. As we approached the city, I felt my phone buzz in my pocket. I glanced at the screen, a text from an unknown number. We know where you are. Stop now, or she dies. A chill ran through me. Problem? Caroline asked, noticing my reaction. I handed her the phone, my jaw tight. She read the message and went pale. They're bluffing, she said, though her voice wavered. Alexei glanced in the rearview mirror. They're not bluffing. Crane's men don't bluff. So what do we do? I asked, adrenaline surging. We keep moving, Alexei said. If we stop, we're dead anyway. I nodded, gripping the armrest as Alexei navigated the winding streets. We reached my office building just after midnight. The area was eerily quiet, the glow of streetlights casting long shadows across the pavement. Stay here, Alexei ordered. I'll cover you from the van. Get what you need and come back fast. I nodded, stepping out of the van and slipping into the building's side entrance. The air inside was thick with tension, every creak of the floorboards setting my nerves on edge. When I reached my office, the safe was exactly where I'd left it, untouched as far as I could tell. I punched in the code, retrieving the journal, notebook, and my phone with the recorded footage. Relief washed over me as I stuffed everything into a bag. But as I turned to leave, I froze. The faint sound of footsteps echoed in the hallway. I ducked behind my desk, holding my breath. The door creaked open, and a beam of light swept across the room. Check the safe, a voice said. It was Victor. I stayed perfectly still, my heart hammering in my chest. It's empty, another voice replied. Victor cursed under his breath. He's close. Find him. I had seconds to act. Gripping the bag tightly, I inched toward the window and unlocked it as quietly as I could. The voices grew louder, closer. With no other choice, I climbed out, landing hard on the fire escape below. Pain shot through my ankle, but I bit back a cry. Above me, Victor leaned out the window, his eyes locking onto mine. There, he shouted. I scrambled down the fire escape, my pulse pounding as shouts erupted above me. Reaching the alley below, I sprinted toward the van, ignoring the ache in my ankle. Alexei threw the door open as I approached. Get in! I dove inside, the van peeling out before I even shut the door. Bullets pinged off the rear bumper as Alexei maneuvered through the narrow streets. When we were finally clear, I exhaled shakily, clutching the bag like a lifeline. They know, I said. They're on to us. Caroline nodded grimly. Then we need to move faster. The flight to Buenos Aires felt like an eternity, though we didn't have the luxury of time to waste. I spent every moment poring over the documents we'd collected, committing every detail to memory. If we failed to reach Elias Kane, this evidence might be the only thing keeping us alive. Alexei had arranged everything. Fake passports, a private charter, and a safe house in the heart of the city. The man was as meticulous as he was lethal, and for that I was grateful. Caroline remained quiet for most of the journey, her expression betraying the weight of what lay ahead. By the time we landed, the sun was dipping below the horizon, casting long shadows over the bustling streets of Buenos Aires. Alexei drove us to a discreet apartment near the Recoleta district, where we regrouped before our meeting with Arturo Reyes, the man who could lead us to Cain. We found Reyes in a dimly lit cafe tucked away in a quiet alley. He was a wiry man in his late 40s with sharp eyes that flicked nervously between us as we approached. He didn't get up to greet us, nor did he offer any pleasantries. "You're late," he muttered in Spanish-accented English, his fingers drumming on the table. "We're here now," Alexei replied, sliding into the seat opposite him. Caroline and I sat on either side, boxing him in. Reyes sighed, glancing around as if expecting an ambush. "Do you know how dangerous this is? Cain doesn't want to be found. Crane's men are already hunting us," I said, keeping my voice low. "Danger isn't the issue anymore. Tell us where Cain is." Reyes hesitated, his jaw tightening. "Do you have any idea what you're asking? If Crane finds out I talked—" "He won't," Alexei interrupted, his tone cold. "But if you don't talk, you'll have more than Crane to worry about." Reyes paled, his eyes darting to Caroline. "You're the witness, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The one Crane wants dead." "That's why we're here," she replied, her tone steely. "Cain can help us bring him down." For a moment, Reyes looked like he might refuse. Then he sighed, leaning in closer. "He's in Patagonia, a remote estate near Bariloche. He has guards, ex-military. If you're going there, you'd better be ready." "We'll manage," Alexei said, standing. "Let's go." Reyes grabbed his arm. "Wait, you're walking into a lion's den. Cain won't help you unless he thinks it's in his best interest." "That's our problem," I said, pulling Reyes' hand off Alexei. "Stay out of sight." The drive to Bariloche was grueling, the jagged peaks of the Andes looming against the horizon as we approached Cain's estate. Alexei had scouted the area beforehand, marking weak points in the perimeter. We arrived under the cover of darkness, the air crisp and biting. The estate was massive, sprawling gardens, towering fences, and a main house that looked more like a fortress. Guards patrolled the grounds in pairs, their flashlights slicing through the night. Alexei handed me a comm device and a pistol. "We go in quiet, no mistakes." Caroline stayed behind in the van, her face pale but resolute. "Be careful," she whispered as I stepped out. Alexei and I moved like shadows, slipping past the guards and scaling the outer fence. The main house was eerily quiet, its windows glowing faintly. We found an unlocked side door and slipped inside, the smell of polished wood and cold air greeting us. Cain was in his study, seated at a massive oak desk. He looked older than his photos, his face lined, his hair streaked with gray. But his presence was commanding. His sharp eyes flicked to us as we entered, and he didn't seem surprised. "I wondered how long it would take you," he said, leaning back in his chair. "You must be Jack Carter." "And you must be Elias Cain," I replied, keeping my pistol at my side. "We need to talk." Cain chuckled dryly. "I suppose you've come to lecture me about the horrors of my creation? Spare me. I've been living with that guilt for years." "Then help us stop it," I said, stepping closer. "Crane is using your infrastructure to turn people into lab experiments. He's expanding, Elias. If we don't shut this down now, it'll only get worse." Cain's expression darkened. "You think I don't know what Crane is doing? I tried to stop him once. Do you know what it cost me? My life, my legacy, everything." "You still have a chance to fix this," Caroline said, stepping into the room. She'd followed us despite my objections. "We have proof, documents, footage, but we need your records to make it stick." Cain stared at her, his eyes narrowing. "You think proof will matter? Crane owns the system." "Then we burn the system," I said, my voice hard. "Expose him so thoroughly that no amount of money can cover it up." For a long moment, Cain said nothing. Then he sighed, opening a drawer in his desk and pulling out a flash drive. "This contains everything: financials, communication logs, experiment details. If Crane sees it coming, he'll bury you before you can act." "Let us worry about Crane," Alexei said, taking the drive. Cain stood, his expression grim. "You've got one shot at this. Don't waste it." The drive back was tense, every shadow feeling like an ambush waiting to happen. But we made it. With Cain's records and our evidence, we handed everything to a trusted journalist. The kind who didn't care about money or threats. 3 days later, the story broke. Crane's empire crumbled overnight. The evidence too damning for even his best lawyers to spin. Arrests were made, his facilities raided, and his assets frozen. Project Vessel was over. Caroline testified under heavy protection, her voice shaking as she recounted everything she'd endured. When it was over, she disappeared again, this time on her own terms. As for me, I returned to my office, the city humming with its usual chaos. But my world was quieter now, my purpose sharper. I'd survived the storm, but the scars would stay. Sometimes the cost of justice is everything.